Now, I did have another video planned for you guys, but outside there is a huge storm and, well, it just means we're stuck inside with the C63. But that isn't necessarily a bad thing because there is still a lot more work to do on the C63. Now, I'm just fixing this C63 in really no particular order. It's really expensive and hard to find parts for, so I'm just carrying on as I find the parts. Now, despite the parts being really hard to find and really expensive, I've made some fairly decent progress from how this used to look. We've got a new subframe, 2 sumps, long tube headers installed. I installed this headlight as well, which now works, and this headlight needs ballast fit into it to make it work. So I've got them on order, and the full front end is looking kind of complete, minus, well, this wiring. Now today the repairs are going to start off fairly easy and progressively get a lot harder. I'm going to carry on underneath the bonnet because we've got a new coolant bottle. There's not much wrong with that coolant bottle, but there's clips which are broken at the back, so it looks fairly messy. So for once we're starting off with a fairly easy job, replacing this coolant reservoir. There's an electrical connector on the bottom, a big hose on the bottom and a small hose on the top. Then we've got this new one which was just £15 off eBay. Clip it in place and pop the hoses back on before filling it with some fresh coolant. Now we're gradually upping the difficulty. We're going to be replacing all spark plugs. Of course this is a V8, so there's 8 of them. This cost them 55,000 miles and bets are on that it's got the original spark plugs that it had from the factory. But we'll soon find out once we start removing them. So to remove the coil packs, there's 2 bolts, an electrical connector, then we can pull the coil out. And now we can see the top of the spark plug. Time to get out the trusty 14mm socket. And there we go, one very old spark plug. With a Mercedes stamp as well, so possibly the one straight from the factory. And we're going to be replacing them with these NGK ones. One done, now 7 left to go. Once one side of the engine is done, I can give it a nice little wipe down, make sure it's all nice and clean before moving over to the other 4 cylinders. Now I'm not going to be changing the air filters which you can see on top of the spark plugs here because I think we may be going for an induction kit or possibly something even better than that. That is looking a lot cleaner and should be running a lot better as well. I'm pretty confident in saying those Mercedes spark plugs that were in there have probably been in there since the car was manufactured in 2012. Here are all of the spark plugs, of course, as well, with that Mercedes stamp on them, so I bet that they have never been changed. Now normally I like to get the actual body of the car done first before we move on to the inside, but that is not the case with this C63. We're just going in random orders. So let me show you what we're working with on the interior of this thing. Well, first things first, we have no window. Both windows have been smashed and I kind of think it's been in some sort of police chase and that was the result of a crash or maybe the police smashing the window, and to back that up, we have some crime tape here. Now moving on inside here, well, it's your normal, really, crash damage stuff, I guess. The steering wheel airbag is gone, but that's easy enough to replace. But the passenger airbag hasn't gone, so normally you wouldn't have to replace the dash. But in this instance, we're gonna have to replace the dash. Down here is what they call a knee airbag, and it's supposed to deploy and stop the driver's, well, knees and shins from breaking or hitting the dashboard. And in this instance, it's actually part of the dashboard, as you can see, this part here. Now I've seen people actually do a smart repair on these, so replace the knee airbag under there and then smart repair the dash up. Problem is, 1, I don't know how to do the smart repair, and 2, I'm bound to get a lot of stick for not doing the sort of safety things properly, so the whole dash has got to come out. But before I get psyched up to do the dashboard, I've got 2 windows for the Mercedes here, so I want to pop the windows in and then finally we'll have windows. Now I've never actually replaced a window on a car, but I can't imagine it being that bad. All I've got to do is remove the door card, which was held in by 3 bolts and a lot of clips. Now once the door card was off, I could see this. Now this silver thing that you can see here, which is actually riveted to the door, actually holds the window regulator. Now these holes which are actually cut out in the silver thing allows me to access the clamps on the window regulator when it's at the right height. So I've got to plug the window switch back into the computer, lower the window down so I can access the clamps for the window, and then I can get at them through the holes. And now the clamps are at the right height, I can get at it with a T30, loosen it off, get any remaining glass out of the clamps, and then it should be about ready for the new window, which I'm unpackaging now. Wow. And it looks like this window was already tinted by the previous C63 owner. I don't know what that tells you about C63 owners. But with that slid into the door and onto the clamps, I can then tighten up the window clamps, and it should be about ready to go all back together. Now there was a lot of glass in the door, so I made a little contraption for the hoover and sucked out as much glass as possible so it wouldn't make a racket when closing the door. Before finishing the driver's side, I gave it a wipe down with some MA leather cleaner, which you can find in the description box below. And that is one side done. Now the passenger side was a little bit harder. As you can see here, there's a fairly big dent in the pillar of the door, which is actually going to stop the window from going up and down. But we'll get on to that. Another thing I found, inside this door, there was a lot of glass. So I actually had to drill out the rivets of the speaker to get the hoover in there to suck out all the glass, because there was a lot. Once the glass was sucked out, I can re-rivet the speaker back into the door card. And then I'm going to have a go at removing this dent. Using a bit of heat and a screwdriver and whatever else I could find, I tried to pull out this dent just to allow the window to move up and down. It's not the best repair, but it'll do for now. Worst case, I'll get a new pillar. And yes, now we've got two front windows. I may need to reassess the window tint, because this window is literally like a limo tint, and the front window is darker than the rear window. But nevertheless, at least they're on and at least they work. The next job is a big one, and there's something that I've never really dealt with before, an airbag seat going off, and I'm still trying to work out whether I can replace this and not have to replace the whole seat. I'm pretty sure that this can just be removed, but we're gonna have to have a look once well, we've got it all out. And the good news is as well, only one curtain airbag has gone off. That side hasn't deployed, so we can get away without doing both of them. But I think we'll start with getting the seats out, then we've got more room to move around the car. The seats in this are fairly straightforward to remove. Just 2 bolts at the front of the rails, 2 bolts at the rear of the rails, and then a lot of electrical connectors in the bottom of the seat. And then of course the seat belt is actually bolted to the seat, and then it's just a case of wiggling it out.
At screens, I look out for the team. Caretaker, never doubt the regime. I built a following off loyalty without a machine. Make my coffee, throw a beat on. Go get what I'm owed, and that's just something we agreed on. They said it wouldn't be long, that's...
So with both seats out, I can see that the passenger seat is, well, that's all good. It's just the driver's seat has this airbag gone. Now I've actually found the separate part number for the airbag in the seat, and after a quick eBaying, look at that, £15.95 for the airbag. That is going straight in my basket. Now, let's tackle the interior. First thing we're starting on is the curtain airbag. These are actually designed to protect the driver if they're in like an accident from the side, like a T-bone. Stop them from hitting the head on the side of the windows. In this case, I could get the old airbag off without removing the headlining, which is a bonus. And there it is, one old curtain airbag. Now a little bit off topic, but if you guys have been following me on Instagram, you'll know that I've been looking at this Ferrari 458 at auction with some very strange damage. But let me show you how Car Vertical, who has sponsored today's video, was able to help me find out what exactly happened to that Ferrari. Now there's a few things that leave me questioning this Ferrari's damage. One is that there's no windscreen on the front. Another is that it's got no parking sensors, and it's also lacking an exhaust. Now most of the damage is actually on the bonnet, whilst the front crash bar actually seems to be fine, and the lower splitter. Yet all the airbags have deployed. Now on the auction website I can actually click to view the registration. So I've got the registration and I've popped it in Car Vertical and done a check on it. Here I can see if it's had any mileage fraud, if it's been stolen. I can see here it's got an amber light that it's been in an accident. Now we know already that it's been in an accident, but I want to find out how it got in an accident. So when I'm scrolling through the report, I can see every time it's had a reg change. And it seems like the person who had this registration, the B111AST, is the person that crashed it. So I've popped that registration plate into Google, and what do you know? I've found the pictures from the crash. And it looks as if this Ferrari made friends with a Skoda Fabia. And I can see now the reason why it doesn't have any parking sensors, because it looked like it had aftermarket bumpers and an exhaust fitted to it. So maybe the owner has switched that over before the car's gone to auction. So thanks Car Vertical for that. And just to show you what a normal report looks like, here's a report on my E46 M3. All green lights at the top, there's no mileage fraud, no theft, no accidents recorded, and it's not been used as a taxi. When I scroll through the report, I can see all the MOT history, whether it's been registered as stolen or any outstanding finance on the car, and whether all the mileage all lines up. And also if the car's been involved in an accident, it will sometimes show you the pictures from the car crash auction website. So to check your car, a friend's car, or a car that you're potentially about to buy, click the link in the description box below, and with my link you're going to save yourself a nice bit of cash as well. Now some of you ask, why can't I do daily uploads? Well, this is part of the reason. Yet again, in Matt Armstrong fashion, we have the wrong part. So I bought these airbags as like an airbag kit. It came with the dashboard, the steering wheel airbag, and the curtain airbags. And it looks as if these were maybe off a different year, or maybe they were off a coupe, but this is the curtain airbag that came off, and the fitting, well, it's completely different, and even these fittings are completely different to that one. Very annoying, but I have just ordered the right one, and now I'm sort of questioning whether the dash is right, but it looks completely fine, so let's move on to the dashboard. Now before I do the dashboard, I just remembered that the rear seat belts have locked out. This normally happens in an accident, just for a safety feature, but that also means you need to replace them. So to get to the rear seat belts, I've got to remove the rear bench and then a few trims and panels before I can finally access the belts. I can only assume the seat belts lock out in an accident just to protect the passengers in case the car's rolled over or something like that. Once I've got all the trims off, I can access the bolt which holds the seat belt and the mechanism to the actual frame of the car. Check the part numbers, make sure they're right, and then order some from eBay. Again, not too expensive because they share the same part number as a lot of the C classes. Now it's time for the dashboard, and I cannot believe we're replacing the dashboard just because of this little knee airbag. Now I'm going to start where I usually start, and that is with the steering wheel. The dash isn't going to be able to pull out with the steering wheel in place, so it's coming straight off. From then it's just trying to find the bolts, the trims, and anything that is holding this dashboard in place. Now I found in my experience, the more premium the car is, the harder it is to remove the dashboard. It's not a bad thing because they are held together really well, but it is a bad thing if you're trying to remove it and replace it. The good thing is that I have the new dashboard, so I can sort of see where the fixtures are before attacking this one blindly. But yes, there was bolts where you just didn't expect them to be bolts. Like underneath the speaker at the very front of the dash. Once that's out, I've got to remove the glove box, which allows me to access the passenger side airbag and all the bolts behind that. Now I wanted to avoid taking the center console out, but it just seems like the dashboard wasn't going to move anywhere with that center console in place. I also found that the gear stick was going to be in the way of the dashboard being removed as well, and because the car was in park with no battery connected to it, I couldn't move it out of gear. But there's a little latch that can see me pushing with my right hand, which allows me to pull the gear stick out of park and into any gear that I'd like, just so I can remove all the trims and the dashboard out the way. And this is the point where you find a few more electrical connectors that you forgot to undo. But with those unclipped, you can pull the dash out to reveal this mess. Okay, and finally, the dashboard is out.
Finally, the dashboard's out!
I'd say that this is on par with the Audi S3 on how difficult it was actually to remove this. There's wires absolutely everywhere and bolts in just unnecessary places. Now, the thing I'm sort of not too sure about, so here is all the airbag computer, and on a lot of cars you do actually replace them, but on the Audis and the Volkswagens and even the BMWs, I've kept the computer intact and then just coded them out when we put new airbags in. But I don't actually know too much about the Mercedes and whether I should actually be replacing that or not. But I guess we're soon to find out. Worst case, we pull the dash out again. Although, I don't fancy doing that. And this is the moment of truth as well. This is the old dash, and this is the new dash. And from looking at each of them, I think they are... Well, I think they are the same, but the whole reason we're replacing it is literally just because of this knee airbag. The whole dashboard, just because of that. Fingers crossed that that will go back in. You can see that the last person who took this dash out struggled a little bit here and probably didn't realise that there was a bolt there when, well, there's bolts everywhere which just shouldn't be bolts. But we're taking it out now, and we all know the rule when taking a dash out. We literally, as soon as you pull it out, you've got to put the new one back in, else you just forget where everything goes. Fingers crossed this is the right dashboard, and fingers crossed I can get it all back in. Now, I'd say refitting the dashboard is actually easier than removing it. Now I know where all the bolts, where all the electrical connectors go and come from, so it's a pretty straightforward but long and tedious job. Again, but if you are looking at potentially buying a crash damaged car and you can see that the airbags are deployed, don't shy away from it. It definitely is a doable job on your driveway. Now I was just about finishing up, but another thing went wrong. This one, quite expensive. So I've made a mistake, and quite an expensive mistake it seems like. It seems as if now, when I put the steering wheel on, and then I turn the ignition, I have no power to the buttons on the steering wheel, no power to the flappy pedals. Now this doesn't resort back to me putting the dash in. It was not a mistake through that. It actually goes back to when I put the subframe on. Now when I took the steering rack off the steering column, when I was doing the subframe, when I was putting it back together, I was twisting the steering column, which was actually spinning the steering wheel round and round and round inside the car, and I was spinning this column round to make sure to get it in the rack. Now if you're not connected to the steering column and you spin this wheel round loads and loads of times, you can actually break this thing here, and this is the clock spring. So you can see the sort of, almost looks like paper inside there, and that allows the steering wheel to spin round whilst keeping a connection to the buttons on the steering wheel, if that makes sense. So when your steering column is connected to the steering rack, you can normally turn your steering wheel about 2 and a bit times and then it would lock. That's because the steering rack is finished, it's got no more lock. But obviously when it's not connected to the steering rack, you can spin it as many times as you like, and I think that's what I've done. And I think I've actually snapped the sort of paper inside here which carries the connection on into the steering column, and I wasn't quite sure to start with because it looks fine in there. So I've actually taken this off and I've gone to this connection here, pop my multimeter inside there, and we're still getting power to this. But as soon as you connect it into the steering column and then put the multimeter on that, we're getting no power, which is completely all my fault. And one of these second hand is £300, so that's a £300 mistake there. And as a note to you guys, don't spin your steering column around loads and loads of times if you haven't got your steering rack connected. Thank you. Now actually this could be used to my advantage. Malibu Performance have got a steering wheel off a newer model of a Mercedes, and apparently if I fit the newer model clock spring, I should be able to fit the newer model steering wheel, but we'll see about that. Last thing we need to do is put the passenger seat back in, but not before giving it a once over with some MA leather cleaner, which again is available with the link in the description box. That's if Hannah's managed to put it on the website in time. I'm only going to be popping in the passenger seat because the driver's seat, of course, still needs that airbag replacing in it. Sometimes this car feels like you take 2 steps forward and then 1 step back, but at least we've taken those 2 steps forwards. We're moving in the right direction. So the progress with the interior is small but a lot better. We now don't have the knee airbag to worry about. All we've got to worry about now is that clock spring. We've got to wait for that to come. And then also, I don't know if you noticed as well, with the glove box there is no handle. I actually looked at buying a handle. It was cheaper to buy a full glove box, which was second hand for 25 quid. But other than that, we're okay. And then moving on to the rears, we just need to get the rear seat belts in, and also obviously that seat belt, and of course this curtain airbag. Now, I did say this was going to be an expensive and a time-consuming build, but that's all part of the fun. And I don't know if you guys noticed in the background, this huge package has arrived. But I'll show you guys what's inside there in the next video. But again, thanks for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it, hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button, and I will see you in the next video. Peace out.